Hey guys, it's your boy CJ Drum back with another Marvel Spider-Man PlayStation 4 related video. As we count down the days, as we wait till September slowly approaches, I figured I would go back and think about and relive some of my top Spider-Man video game moments. So we're going to start at number 5 and work our way up. So number 5 is Web of Shadows, The Combat. Now, I know a lot of people did not like Web of Shadows. The sales for that game were very poor. The reviews and the reception of the report. I mean, to be honest, the game wasn't great. However, the one thing that the developers tried to focus on was the one thing that, for the most part, was really good, and that was the combat. Now, don't get me wrong, combat did become repetitive. However, that first time you played this game through, the very first time you got to experience Spider-Man in this way was truly unique and unlike any other game that came before it. Combat took place on the ground, it took place on the walls, and it took place in the sky. And it was really fun zipping through a different opponent, zipping here, zipping there, fighting opponents on the wall, then having to fight opponents immediately in the air, and vice versa. That game also had a lot of unique and interesting unlockables for the combat, and it also had different moves depending on which version of Spider-Man you will get to, and we'll get to a little bit of that a little bit later. But just in general, that game for me was really fun. I really enjoyed the combat, and honestly, I would love to see variations of wall combat and air combat find their ways back into newer games, specifically Insomniac games, with their own twist. I mean, I don't want it to be the exact same because again, that game did become repetitive. However, it was good for what it was. So number 4 is web swinging in Spider-Man 2. Now, obviously, for most people, this was the quintessential Spider-Man game. This is the game that introduced Spider-Man to open world sandbox gameplay, and it was probably one of my favorite games, especially at the time. Now, I loved web swinging, and at first it was difficult when you had to try to coordinate, the left, using L2 and then using R2, but there was a lot of interesting things that you could do with it. I mean, that game really kind of moved away from that iconic web swing that you saw in like the cartoons where Spider-Man would shoot out a web, swing, throw his legs forward, shoot out another web while he was still holding the other, and you kind of were able to seamlessly kind of just flow. But that actually can't work or doesn't work in real life based on how Spider-Man would actually be swinging. But in Spider-Man 2, once you got into a rhythm, you can kind of manipulate that a little bit in a much more realistic way. Spider-Man 2, again, is probably one of my favorite Spider-Man games, and that web swinging was amazing. Number 3 on my list, Johnny Storm races in Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man actually is probably either 1 or 2 of my top Spider-Man games. I'm not exactly sure, but I really loved Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man, I mean, it was very comic bookish. It had the feel of a young Spider-Man, and it was extremely fun. It didn't take itself too seriously. It wasn't too goofy. It had that right mix. It was right in the middle. Web swinging, traversal in that game was very fun. It was very fast. It was very fluid. Obviously, it's not as fine-tuned as we'll say as the traversal in the upcoming Marvel Spider-Man game, but for its time, it was great. And what was even better about it was racing Johnny Storm. So I really like those races because you got to feel connected with a greater Marvel universe. I mean, there was a lot of characters in some of the other games. That game had its fair share of interesting characters, but just seeing like a member from the Fantastic Four in that game really made it feel Marvel-ish, and it was really fun competing with another Marvel character. Next on my list, number 2, is Web of Shadows again, but it was transforming back and forth from the red suit going into the Venom, the black symbiote suit. But I'm going to kind of cheat here, and I'm going to say that I'm also going to add being Venom in the Ultimate Spider-Man. So I'm going to give you guys 2 for 1 here. But again, transforming from the red suit into that black suit whenever you wanted on the fly during missions was, to me, amazing. I really loved that. And the fact that you had different combos and movesets between the black suit and your red and blue suit made it just that much better. I really, really want to see that kind of dynamic in another game in the future. It was beyond amazing. But again, my little cheat here is I'm going to go with, again, Ultimate Spider-Man being Venom. Being Venom was fun because he was a completely different character than Spider-Man. His controls, his mechanics were very different. He didn't web swing. He literally just hopped from block to block to block, from building to building to building. And it was just so different. It was so unique. It was really enjoyable. And again, one of those things that I really wish we could see a variation of it in the future. Now, before I go to my number one, I have to say, I wanted to, and I tried to, incorporate the Amazing Spider-Man games in this list. But I have to be honest, I could not think of one single moment that I found truly exhilarating from either of those games. Don't get me wrong, I did play both of them. At the time, I enjoyed both of them. Web swinging was better in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Everything else was better in The Amazing Spider-Man 1. But again, with that being said, I really wanted to get them on this list, and I just could not. So with that being said, we're going to go to number one. My number one favorite Spider-Man video game moment was Neversoft Spider-Man 1, The Web Chases. So during that game, you were actually set up to make it look like Spider-Man robbed a convention. He stole something. The police were on the lookout for Spider-Man, and in one particular scene, they actually chased you through the city. Now, they weren't just chasing you. I mean, the police were trying to kill Spider-Man. They were firing missiles, and they were using their the machine guns from the helicopters to try to take down the web crawler. And that mission, to me, was the best mission I've ever played in any Spider-Man game ever. Even though the game mechanics were, they were so-so, they were excellent for the time. And even though the web swinging was, again, okay, you did get a sense of, Spider-Man actually being in the 3D world, which was amazing. Not as fine-tuned as something that we would have today, but that whole mission, just to me, blows every other mission I've ever played in any Spider-Man game out of the water. And seeing as though that is Brian Intahar's favorite Spider-Man game, I would absolutely love to see his variation, his take on that style of chase. Spider-Man running from the police, being almost gunned down essentially. I really hope Brian incorporated that into his game in some way. But guys, that's it for me. Let me know what your top Spider-Man moments are. Get in those comments below. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys on my next video. Peace out.
Lost in base.